Talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
When Sung-ho was being tortured by North Korean officials, there was one thing that kept him from losing hope. Over and over again, he recited the Lord's Prayer.
The very people warning us about Russia are in fact key players in the Russian conspiracy. The leaders of the witch hunt are witches.
The rhetoric of treason has been around a long time. It's irresponsible, it's reckless.
Adam Schiff was part of that machine.
This package does not have my support, nor does it have the support of a large number of members of our caucus. Nabella Vladimir says I am an AP scholar. I'm a distinguished high school graduate. I'm a cum laude student. I'm a leader. I'm a recipient of scholarships and merit and circumstances.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative radio, conservative talk radio. Glad to have you in our conversation today. Again, we are in the book of Job, the Old Testament book of Job. In our daily reading, you can find the schedule at pray.afa.net. And we are walking through the experience of Job, who was blameless and upright according to God. It wasn't his own opinion, wasn't even the opinion of his friends. It was God's opinion of Job. In fact, he was the one that drew Satan's attention to Job. Where have you come from? God says to Satan. I've come from wandering to and fro on the earth. And God says, well, have you considered my servant Job? He's blameless and upright. He turns away from evil. He turns his face toward the good. Have you ever considered him? And Satan says, well, yeah, I've thought about him, but I can't touch him because you built a hedge around him. You take that hedge away from him. You let me at him, and he will curse you to his face. And so God says to Satan, all right, you can have at him. You can go after things that he has. You can't touch him. I'm going to bar you from actually touching him, his body, and his life, but you can go after anything else in his world. And so Satan goes after his possessions, destroys all his livestock, a very rich man, but they're all gone. Then he destroys his family, had 10 children. They're all gone. The roof collapses on them, and they all die. And so Job is left just with his wife, and she tells him to curse God and die. She's no help to him at all. And so he's wrestling with the fact that these terrible things have happened to him, and he's a good person as far as he knows. Now, he hasn't heard God's assessment, because as far as we know, God never clues Job in. You know, one of the realities, ladies and gentlemen, is some of the suffering that we do, there's always a reason for it. God always has a plan for it. He always has a purpose that's for our good, to refine and to shape and to mold. But we're not always told exactly what that purpose looks like. We can have the assurance that because God is sovereign, because God cares about us, because he has purposes and plans for us, and primarily that purpose is to mold us into a certain kind of people. It's not to make us wealthy. It's not to make us happy, not to make us healthy, but it is to make us righteous. It's to make us holy, not happy but holy, not healthy but holy. And if God thinks that there is a way that he can add to our holiness and ask us to do without a certain amount of happiness or a certain amount of health for a certain period of time, then God is willing to do that, because turning us into people that resemble him is far more important to him than anything else. Now then Job runs into his friends, and they were worse than anybody else because they were convinced, and again, this is part of the shallow theology In fact, they have actually good theology here in chapters 8 and 9. Their theology is actually pretty good, but their application is all messed up. And sometimes that happens. Our theology, we can grab verses completely out of context. We can be convinced that we understand them, and our theory and the principles are correct, and our theology may even be in the abstract correct, but it's completely at variance with how that Scripture applies to life and at variance with what God is doing in our life, despite our shallow understanding of the Scripture. So here's what his friend Bildad the Shuhite in Job 8:1, he was the shortest man in the Bible, by the way, Bildad the Shuhite. And anyway, he's given Job counsel. He says, how long will you say these things, Job? Job, you're defending yourself. You're saying you're not aware of any sin against yourself, but you got to have a hidden sin in your life. These terrible things wouldn't happen to you because God, this is their shallow theology, God does not let bad things happen to good people. Now, a lot of people have that shallow understanding that if you are following God, your life is going to be one blessing after another. There'll be no reversals. If you're experiencing reversals, that's contrary to God's will for you, and therefore you must be lacking in faith, or you must be tolerating secret sin. So this is what Bildad says to him. How long will you say these things in your own defense, and the word of your mouth be a great wind, nothing but hot air coming out of your mouth? Does God pervert justice? No. So if bad things are happening to you, then it must be because you deserve it, because God does not pervert justice. Does the Almighty pervert what is right? Now you look at those verses in the abstract. Does God pervert justice? No, he does not. Does the Almighty pervert the right? No, he does not. But the shallowness of their theology was in their application. If God does not pervert the right or pervert justice, then if something bad is happening to you, because God never does anything unjust, then it means that you deserve what's happening to you. And they stuck to that shallow theology and just beat Job over the head with it. If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. Notice the complete lack of compassion here. This sort of shallow cookie cutter paint by numbers theology, where you think you have every little part of your theology fits in a tidy little cubbyhole. It's all compact. It's all isolated from the other parts of your little theology. You know, it's like a whole bank of mailboxes, and you got everything in its little slot. And so there's no room for compassion in that. He says, if your children died, it must be because your children sinned against God, and God has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. Then he says, if you will seek God, plead with the Almighty for mercy. If you are pure and upright, then surely he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. So the theology is fine. It's their application that was horrible. In fact, we see at the end of Job's life, all these things happened to him. God restored his habitation. God restored his fortune. His latter days were very great. But that's not how they're interpreting it. Again, their interpretation is shallow because their period of time, their time view, was far too limited. Well, let's go to prayer and pray some of these concepts, some of this theology even, back to God. And again, this is a very personal prayer for someone going through unexplained suffering. If this is you, then this prayer is for you. Identify with this prayer. If you know somebody in your family or friend going through unexplained suffering, terrible time of unexplained something, then put yourself in their place and pray this prayer as proxy for your friend. Lord God, I humble myself before you as a God who is mighty in strength. You remove mountains. You shake the earth out of its place so that its pillars tremble. You command the sun and seal up the stars. You stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea. You made the great constellations we see in the night sky, the Bear and Orion and the Pleiades. You are a God who does great things beyond searching out and marvelous things beyond number. but it seems as if I have become the object of your anger, and that your anger is not turned away from me. Yet, Lord, I continue to seek you. I bow myself before you and appeal
Here's
to
some
you
great
for mercy.
news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program that's been around for 25 years, and they have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $1 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money. Think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have a lot to offer? Well, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. When their mom passed, the Landau brothers of New Jersey had a garage sale to clear out their mom's house. But they decided to keep a few things, including mom's old creepy painting of a woman passed out in a chair and two men trying to revive her. Fast forward to their estate auction, and the brothers found themselves fielding bids from France and Germany for the painting. Turns out it was a long-lost Rembrandt that ultimately sold for $1.1 million. A trained eye spots value where others don't.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you with us. By the way, we are going to have Ken Ham on this program at 1:40 Central Time. That's just about 23 minutes from now. Ken Ham, the founder of the Creation Museum. He's the founder of the Ark Display, one of the leading advocates for creation, the guy that had the nationally televised debate between him and Bill Nye, the science guy. In my opinion, he wiped the floor with Bill Nye, the science guy. But Ken Ham was banished by a university. They blackballed him, blacklisted him, censored him because of the content of his message, what he was going to say. So we'll have him on at 1:40 to talk about his experience. Now, a couple of other items before we get to some of our content. There is an evangelical singer who may very well be the next president of Costa Rica. This is a story from the Associated Press in San Jose, Costa Rica. Religious and social conservatives in Costa Rica have found a lot to object to from President Luis Guillermo Solis's government. Decision to allow in vitro fertilization, a plan to recognize civil unions for same-sex couples, publication of sex education guidelines, announcement of courses that would include discussion of sexual diversity. Less than a week after he took office, the rainbow flag was raised over the presidential residence for the first time ever to mark the International Day Against Homophobia. You know what the abbreviation of that is? The International Day Against Homophobia, Idaho. International Day Against Homophobia. So one of our proudest days as a state when that slogan was adopted. But this week, religious conservatives flexed their muscle at the ballot box, angered by a ruling of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights telling Costa Rica to allow gay marriage. They helped evangelical candidate Fabricio Alvarado finish first in the country's presidential election and put him in the pole position for an April 1 runoff against a candidate of Solis's party. So this court went too far in pushing the homosexual agenda, and the voters in Costa Rica, they struck back. He is a journalist by training. He's known for his impassioned speaking style. He's a preacher and a Christian singer. He spent a lot of time working for one of the country's main TV newscasts, which has given him a familiarity and an ease on the campaign trail. And so he may very well be the next president of Costa Rica. And speaking of that, here is a winnable war moment. Something happened for the first time in the world this week, and that is that Bermuda became the first country to legalize and then repeal same-sex marriage, in what critics have called an unprecedented rollback of civil rights by the British island territory. Bermuda's Senate and House of Assembly passed the legislation by wide margins in November. Majority of voters opposed same-sex marriage in a referendum. And the British government, they were expecting the British government to come in and put a stop to this nonsense about getting back to man-woman marriage. They did not. They signed off on it. British government says, we'll let you make your own decision. Bermuda, they decided to dump same-sex marriage. So all they've got now is same-sex partnership. Now, they get all the same rights that married couples do. They just don't get the label. They don't get the name. And realize how important that label is to homosexuals. They got all the rights they want. For them, it is not about rights. It's about compelling society to embrace and to accept and to honor their same-sex unions. So that's a historic first time it's ever happened. And again, I talked yesterday about how we might have reached peak gay in the United States and maybe even around the world. This is Bermuda, where the homosexual movement has reached its crescendo, sort of like the high water mark of the Confederacy was at Gettysburg when a few Confederate soldiers breached the Union line up on Cemetery Ridge. Then they were thrown back, and that was pretty much the end of the advance of the Confederate armies. Well, we might have reached peak gay here, or peak pink, if you want to use that terminology. And maybe now the forces of righteousness and common sense have begun to regain a little bit of momentum. Walgreens, by the way, they've told transgenders you can use whatever bathroom you want in our store. So Walgreens now has gone the way of Target. I started talking about this the other day. By the way, Donald Trump, I think it was Tony Perkins said that Donald Trump may wind up being the most pro-life president in the history of the United States. Now, the Trump administration said yesterday that there's only 4 international organizations and a dozen of their local partners who have refused to accept the new rules that President Trump laid down for spending U.S. assistance on health care. The United States provides $8.8 billion for health care around the world, more than any other nation in the world by far. And Donald Trump this year instituted a new rule that none of that money, not a single dollar, can go to an organization that promotes or performs abortions overseas. That's the Mexico City policy. Now, there were 733 organizations whose funding came up for renewal under these new restrictions for the first time. 729 of them agreed to the new rules. Only 4 of them, including, you might guess, Planned Parenthood and Marie Stopes International, which is affiliated with Planned Parenthood, they were the only ones, 4 out of 733, who said, no, we must do abortions. We must kill babies, and we'll turn down your money. We're not going to let you bribe us into protecting unborn human life. We're not going to let you dangle money in front of us to betray our fundamental principles. We are determined to kill babies. Don't try to buy us off. So 4 organizations out of 733 said we are going to continue to do abortions, and we're going to kiss off the money that otherwise would be ours from the American government. So that's a winnable war moment, ladies and gentlemen. Big-time winnable war. Donald Trump fulfilling his promises to be a pro-life president. Now, here's another great story. This is another winnable war moment. You know, Gerber has a baby contest every year to have the official baby for their bottles of baby food. You know how the bottles of Gerber baby food all have the picture of that little cherubic baby on them? Mm-hmm. Well, they used the same baby until 2011. It was a charcoal drawing that was made in 1928 of the original Gerber baby, Ann Turner Cook. They used it till 2010, 2011, that they said, we're going to find a new Gerber baby, and so they did. They, again, looked for a new Gerber baby this year, and they have picked an 18-month-old boy from Georgia who has Down syndrome. So for the first time, the Gerber baby is a boy with Down syndrome to win the contest. This is a winnable war moment. You know, and in the United States, I mean, this boy is absolutely lucky, divine providence, that he's even alive. Because 90% of the babies in America that are diagnosed in the womb with Down syndrome are aborted. So good for Gerber, putting a baby on, the picture of a baby on their little jars of baby food that escaped barely the butcher's knife.
And he's adorable, too. Have you seen pictures?
Yeah, he's a cute little guy. Yeah, you can see why they picked him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, Down syndrome babies and children, I mean, they are just full of joy. They bring life and laughter and smiles and warmth and affection to everybody that's in their world. They do live lives that are worth living, and they brighten everybody's life around them. It's an absolute crime that their lives are snuffed out before they ever get a chance to draw their first breath. I got an interesting story about the Gerber baby jars. I went on a mission trip down to, no, this was a missionary that came to our church. It wasn't the trip I took to Suriname. This was a missionary came to our church, and they had gone on missions outreach to a tribal people in the South American bush. That's what they call the jungle down there. They call it the bush. And he was describing a funny thing that happened to them when they were first setting up in this tribal village, which had never even seen white people before. So they're setting up. They built a little thatched house to live in, and they're setting up. And so the villagers are just fascinated. They've never seen white people before. They'd never seen Western-style clothes before. They hadn't seen a lot of the stuff that this missionary family pulled out of their luggage to use and to set up in their little home. And then they noticed they started pulling food out of their supply, and they began to notice that if there was a can and it had a picture of tomatoes on the outside of the can, there were tomatoes inside the can. And if they had another jar that had green beans and the picture on the outside of the can, there were green beans inside the jar. And then he said they just absolutely freaked out when we started pulling out Gerber baby food with pictures of little tiny cherubic babies on the outside. But we cured them of their misapprehension rather quickly. But I've always remembered that story. I thought that was a pretty cute little story. All right. Now I'm going to finish this story. I started it last week and never did finish it. By the way, in South Korea, they have 12, in Pyongyang, they have 12 restaurants that feature dog food. What they serve is dog food. I mean, cooked and fried and fricasseed and whatever. Now, the South Korean government tried to persuade them not to do it during the Olympics, and 10 of them refused. So they're still serving dog food, and they're going to do it all the way through the Olympics. South Koreans consume about 1 million dogs a year, and only 2 of the restaurants out of the 12 have complied. Some of the restaurants shifted to selling pork or other things, but their sales plunged sharply, so they went back to dog meat.
So it's dog meat, not dog food, but actually dogs themselves.
Meat, yeah, they cook them up. Dog meat is officially classed as detestable by Seoul, as is snake. But the designation has no legal ramifications. Now, just from a moral standpoint, I just want to be clear about one thing. From a moral standpoint, there isn't anything immoral about eating dogs, any more than there's something immoral about eating cows, or eating baby or goats, or eating baby veal, baby cows. It's just we have just kind of a cultural hitch when we think about it, which is understandable. They're cute and they're cuddly. But in South Korea, mores are changing there, and the younger generation, millennials, they're not eating dog meat anymore. They're going back to regular Western food. I'll be right back with my story about meditation. I'm going to finish it up, I promise. Be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The release of the House Intelligence Committee memo has raised grave constitutional questions. Did officials at the highest levels of the Justice Department and the FBI collude with operatives of the Clinton presidential campaign to employ scurrilous opposition research furnished by foreign intelligence operatives, i.e. spies, and paid for by the Clinton campaign to obtain warrants under false pretenses from FISA courts to spy on individuals in the Trump election campaign and the Trump transition team? Let's be clear. This Justice Department FISA-gate controversy demands answers. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz underscored the essential truth at the heart of this FISA-gate when he said, quote, "Every American, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, has a stake in making sure that the FBI remains accountable and follows the law and follows the Constitution," end quote. I believe it is now time for the appointment of Alan Dershowitz as a new special counsel to investigate the apparent unconstitutional abuses of American civil liberties by rogue officials in the Justice Department and the FBI. Mr. Dershowitz is a longtime supporter and friend of Hillary Clinton and a Democrat, but he is also deeply committed to civil liberties, and his only client would be the U.S. Constitution and its ironclad protections of American citizens from violations of their freedoms by their government. Mr. Dershowitz would go wherever the evidence led him, whatever the consequences, and no one could accuse him of partisan bias, a political vendetta, or an establishment cover-up. Unless the government is willing to take such extraordinary measures and give Mr. Dershowitz or someone of similar stature the power to investigate, prosecute, and root out rogue actors in our justice system, then our constitutional rights are in the gravest danger. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. Talking here about a number of things in the opening part of the program. Don't forget, in about 8 minutes, we'll have Ken Ham. Ken Ham is the founder of the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. That's the life-size model of the Ark, and it's one of the most popular tourist attractions in the state of Kentucky. People coming from all over the country to see it. We're going to talk about what happened to him at the University of Central Oklahoma when he was invited to speak there. We'll talk to him about the reception that he got and what happened. Now, I mentioned that the other day, I think it was Wednesday or Tuesday, I started talking about this, a story on the Daily Mail about meditation, Buddhist meditation, from Eastern religions. And the Dalai Lama said one time, this is a quote, "If every 8-year-old in the world is taught meditation, the world will be without violence within 1 generation." Second line in the story, Daily Mail in the UK, "It appears the respected monk could be wrong. Scientists have revealed the trendy Buddhist practice does not," scientists revealed, the trendy Buddhist practice does not make you more compassionate, less aggressive, or prejudiced. Researchers from the UK, New Zealand, and the Netherlands have found meditation doesn't change how adults behave toward others. Despite the fact that they promised that if you had enough individuals practicing this technique, it would lead to peace on earth and goodwill toward men, it has not happened. Now, so a lot of people wonder about meditation. Is there something wrong with Eastern meditation? And the reality is, Eastern meditation is a form of dabbling in the occult. Now, it's different than biblical meditation. There's a right kind of meditation, and there is a wrong kind of meditation. I believe one of the reasons why this Eastern style of meditation doesn't help is the Eastern style of meditation simply opens you up to demonic spirits. And they'll be happy to come in and reinforce all of your personality's crankiness and moodiness and impatience. They'll be happy to augment all of that as much as they can. And Eastern meditation opens your spirit and your mind up to those spirits. Because in Eastern meditation, the kind that the Dalai Lama practices and others, the idea is you are supposed to empty your mind of everything. Just let your mind go blank, and then you trust or expect that the good spirits will fill your mind with peace and calm and whatever you need to be at one with your circumstances, your neighbors, and your world. And these scientists discovered, no, it doesn't work that way. Because what you do when you engage in Eastern meditation, where you let your mind go blank, you empty your mind, and then you invite whatever's out there to come in there, you are simply opening your inner life, your mind, and your heart and your soul. You're opening your mind and heart and soul, your inner life up to the demonic spirits that are out there, and they will be happy to come in. You've given them an open invitation to come in, and they will take advantage of it because you're opening yourself up with absolutely no protection. Now, there is a form of meditation that is biblical, it is helpful, and it is right. Now, this kind of meditation is the meditation that the psalmist speaks of in Psalm chapter 1 in verse 3. What the psalmist says in Psalm 1, he says the man who is blessed is the man whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law, on the teaching of God, on the Scripture, he meditates day and night. Now, the word meditate, you look it up in the lexicon, it means to ponder or to mutter or to muse. Now, what is somebody who is muttering doing? Well, what are they doing? They're talking to themselves. So the blessed is the man who talks to himself about the Word of God. He stores it up in his mind, he ponders it, he thinks about it, and he talks to himself about what he has read in the Scriptures. So meditation biblically is not emptying your mind, it is filling your mind with the Word of God. It's filling your mind with the truth of God. It's reflecting on the truth of God. So it's not emptying your mind or emptying your heart or emptying your soul, but biblical meditation, helpful meditation, productive meditation is filling your mind with the truth and the Word of God, and then pondering it, turning it over in your mind. That's the kind of meditation that will make you calmer and more at peace with yourself and with those that are in your world. Blessed is the man who meditates on the law of the Lord day and night. The word that's translated law there is the word Torah, which just means instruction. It's from the Hebrew word to point, as if God in his instruction is pointing out to us the truth of his word. So that's my little lesson on meditation. By the way, one of the fallouts from all of this, the expose of all of this sexual harassment that's been taking place in Hollywood and other places, is that major studios now are racing each other to add morality clauses to their contracts with their actors. Morality clauses, if you can believe it, in 2018. They're putting morality clauses in their contracts with their actors. If you violate a morality clause, then this contract is null and void. We're not going to owe you the money that we promise you here. So it's broad language in these contracts. And the actors, if they're accused of misconduct, and these clauses are being included in more and more contracts in Hollywood. Even the phrase moral turpitude is in these contracts. Can you believe that? This is Fox Studios, Paramount doing the same thing. an act or behavior that gravely violates the sentiment or accepted standard of the community will be grounds to terminate or invalidate the contract. Now, can you imagine? You know, it's amazing what it takes for Hollywood to get its mind right. Can you imagine if we in the pro-family community imagine that we were the ones that proposed this? Maybe we even started a movement to get morality clauses in Hollywood contracts. We even had marches in Hollywood carrying signs advocating morality clauses in Hollywood contracts. We get laughed out of town. We would be scorned as Victorian prudes, Victorian blue noses, but Hollywood actually now scared straight by what's happening in Hollywood. It's my pleasure to bring as a guest on our Decision Maker line. Ken Ham has been a guest on this program before. Ken Ham, as you are aware, is the president of Answers in Genesis. He is the founder of the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter. Ken, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hey, it's great to be with you again.
Well, Ken, it's good to be with you. And talk to us about what happened to you at the University of Central Oklahoma. You would think Oklahoma, that's not that far from the Bible Belt. Those people have to be conservative. They know all about the Bible. So tell us what happened to you at the University of Central Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think it's really opened up a lot of people's eyes because you tend to think of Oklahoma as conservative, you know, Bible Belt area and so on. I was actually invited to speak there by the Student Association and to give a presentation at the university, and I agreed to do that. And actually, we got two signed contracts, one that we sent them and one they sent us, and signed by university officials as well as the Student Association, to speak there on March the 5th. Well, we started to get an inkling that something was wrong because the president of the Student Association was calling us and saying that they got some problems, that there's been a lot of pressure from the LGBT group on the campus to stop me from coming. And I was actually asked if I would not mention LGBT, not mention marriage or speak on those topics, or even at the question time, not answer any questions in relation to those issues. And, you know, that wouldn't be right for me to agree for them to restrict what I can say. And then it gets down to technicalities, what you can, what you can't. You know, there's freedom of speech in this nation. But I wasn't even going to deal with LGBT groups or anything anyway in my talk. But apparently what happened was that a tenured professor who's in charge of the LGBT groups at the university stirred up the students to really bully. And in fact, even in the Oklahoman, the big newspaper in Oklahoma today, this morning, there was an article there, and they quote from the student president of the association that says that that members of a group affiliated with the Women's Research Center, BGLTQ+, at the university opposed Ham's visit because of his views that marriage is between one man and one woman. So just because I believe in marriage, as one man and one woman, they oppose me. And actually, as a result, they canceled me from speaking there. And the student president goes on and says, I want to be very clear on this. There have been members of our campus who have tried to bully me in my decision. While none of the examples have involved the administration, there's definitely something that must be done to address this issue. I'm not the first person to personally be attacked by a vocal group on campus. There is little tolerance for opposing views. And so this group they usually claim tolerance and inclusiveness, this particular group put so much pressure and bullied the Student Association so much that they ended up having to cancel. And I got a feeling they were concerned about safety. They were concerned about what was going to happen. And, you know, the fascinating thing is when you look on the university website, it says they're committed to an inclusive educational environment. They're committed to fostering a learning environment where free inquiry and expression are encouraged. And the university is a diverse community based on a free exchange of ideas. And now I'm going to add this, except when it comes to Christians, creationists being allowed on campus to speak, even though they agreed and signed a contract to do so. The freedom of speech, our First Amendment rights in this nation are under attack. And we're seeing this movement against free speech happen across the nation in colleges. So this should be a wake-up call for people.
Well, it certainly should. And you think about the First Amendment and how broad it is, Ken. And, you know, it says freedom of speech. It doesn't say freedom of speech unless it's religious speech, or freedom of speech unless it's about homosexuality, or freedom of speech unless it's about origins. It just says freedom of speech. And speech, that's the freedom to open your mouth and say words. You know, and Ken, I'm even looking at the Oklahoma Constitution. It says every person, that would include you, Ken Ham, every person may freely speak, write, or publish his sentiments on all subjects. So that would include creationism, and it would definitely include speaking on matters of human sexuality. Now, and no law shall be passed to restrain or abridge the liberty of speech or of the press. So that would indicate that the one who is in the wrong here is the University of Central Oklahoma. They're abridging a right that is enshrined in their state constitution as well as in the federal constitution. So let me go ahead.
And they're tax funded.
Yeah, it's a publicly funded. It's funded by the taxpayers. Now let me ask this, Ken. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but does your organization plan any response to this?
Well, it's interesting that a lot of media have responded, and, I've been on Fox News Radio, and the article Todd Starnes wrote on the Fox News website was trending #1 yesterday and last night, and it's trending again today. Front page in the Oklahoma newspaper. So it's brought a lot of attention to this, and one of the pastors in the area who has a Christian group that ministers at the university there, at the University of Central Oklahoma, opened his doors to us, and so I'm going to give the same presentation at Fairview Baptist Church on March the 5th at 6:30 p.m., the same presentation I was going to give at the university. And as a result of this, I think, in a sense, our response is that I'm actually being interviewed by all sorts of radio, yourself, for instance. We've got a TV station that's waiting for me to call back right now, various newspapers, news sources. It's been taken up across the nation. And, to me, I hope what comes out of this is that people in Oklahoma will realize, wait a minute, we're supposed to be even a conservative state, and we're losing our freedom of speech and religious freedoms here. If a small minority, and it's not just a minority, a small minority of students at a university like this can so bully and pressure a student association that they cancel me speaking, then we've got problems. And it's interesting, the same university, think about this, the same university, University of Central Oklahoma, sponsored a drag queen event and even allowed their logo to be on that brochure about the drag queen event, and actually contributed funding to it. And the same professor that stirred up the students to oppose me coming there sponsors the LGBT groups on campus and sponsors the safe-sex carnival, which they do such perverse things at that carnival. I couldn't even talk about them on air, but that's okay. But to have a Christian creationist come in and speak who happens to believe marriage is one man and one woman, that's not even the topic of the presentation. Oh, no, that's a no-no.
Well, and it's interesting, too, Ken, that these are the people that pride themselves on how tolerant they are and how open-minded they are. And this is probably the same crowd that would probably have seminars against bullying. And yet here they are bullying the student that sponsored this speech and showing absolutely no tolerance for your point of view or the point of view of other students who might agree with you.
Exactly. And, we've got to understand something. This is not just an isolated example. People need to understand this is happening all across the nation. It's been happening in many different ways. This intolerance that those who don't believe in a Christian worldview are showing against Christians. And, think about the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They're they call themselves a group of unabashed atheists that bully counties and bully schools into imposing their atheistic worldview and getting rid of Christian symbols and so on. This sort of thing has been going on for quite some time. And it's also indicative of the fact that there's an incredible chasm in America, a chasm between the older generation that are much more Christianized in their thinking and have more of a Christian morality and worldview, and the younger generations that have been so secularized by these colleges and the education system that they can't think for themselves. and they don't even understand the First Amendment of the United States, don't understand what free speech is, don't understand freedom of religion. They're so brainwashed, they're so indoctrinated. And, the question to ask is, where are the adults in all of this? Where are the leaders in all of this? And it seems to me, from what I've read, that the leaders at the university are saying, well, that's the student association, it's their decision, they don't interfere with their decisions. Wait a minute, they're the leaders, and their officials signed a contract for this. They should be the ones standing up for free speech.
Now, this contract, Ken, I would assume this would be if it's a signed contract, it's legally binding on the university. How do they justify reneging on it?
Well, what an example. You're saying to students, so what, you have a signed contract. So what, it's legally binding. We don't have to obey that. And, and sadly, that's something else that happens today a lot, is that, there's this blurring between what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. And no wonder the millennials, these younger generations, no wonder we talk about them as being different from the older generations, because they really don't have the same morality, and words don't mean the same things anymore. So it all becomes newspeak in a way. It's however you want to interpret it, And unfortunately, we even got people in our churches now, younger generation, doing that with the Bible. It's however you want to interpret it, whatever you want to believe that you think is right.
Now, Ken, if I understand it, I think I understood you when you first came on air that you were not intending to speak on the LGBT agenda. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they did put down a title, Genesis. No, it was to do with the state of, Genesis and the state of the culture. And so, what I was going to do is something similar to what I did for Bill Nye debate, talk about what science is, what it is, and how we have different worldviews, and those different worldviews determine how we interpret evidence in biology, geology, astronomy, and so on, but they also determine how the worldview that we have, and that relates to, right and wrong, and the issue of marriage may come into that, just saying what I believe.
And obviously, early chapters of Genesis have huge impact on cultural issues like gender. How many genders are there? What's the definition of marriage? And so this is a worldview that at a university you think would be something that would be open for debate and discussion. Let's hear somebody defend it and explain it, and we can ask questions, we can respond to it, we can criticize it, and we can hear the guy respond and defend his worldview. That seems to be what you'd want on a college campus.
It does, and when I'm talking to people who disagree with me, I don't want to show hate to them. In fact, people have complimented me on the way I treated Bill Nye, even though he was a bit condescending at times in that debate. I didn't treat him that way. I treated him with respect. And if somebody comes to me and has a totally different worldview in regard to marriage or abortion or any of those issues, I recognize that I can't just impose my worldview on them. If they don't have the foundation I got, they won't even understand it. So what I do is I explain why I believe what I do, where my starting point is in the Bible. If they don't agree with the Bible, I totally get it. They're going to have a different worldview. So the real battle is not really about marriage or abortion or LGBT or whatever. The real battle is really about, why don't you believe the Bible, and why do I believe the Bible, and why do I believe science confirms the Bible's account of origins, and that we can trust the Bible in every area. That's really what the battle is all about, and that's how I approach those issues. And the thing is, I don't show hate towards those people. I don't bully them. I don't attack them. But you know what I find? They show incredible hate towards those who don't agree with them. On my Twitter, my Facebook, social media, if I talk about issues of marriage, or when I talked about the fact we were lighting up the life-size ark we have here in Kentucky with the rainbow at night, and that we were taking back the rainbow because God talks about the rainbow in Genesis 9 and so on, people who support the LGBT movement got on my Twitter and they made some of the most perverse comments and using expletives and personal attacks and blaspheming, and I don't do that to them. I don't go attacking them like that. And, you don't hear Christians at a university like the University of Central Oklahoma getting together to stop a secular speaker coming because they happen to believe in gay marriage or something like that. But here you have the LGBT movement putting pressure on them to stop a Christian coming. So it's a one-way street here in regard to the way they act.
Yeah, I noticed one other thing, Ken, and then I'll let you go. But again, in the Oklahoma Constitution, it says that the people have the right peaceably to assemble for their own good. So if people want to get together and it's peaceable, they don't have violent motives in mind or violent purposes, they're meeting together for their mutual benefit, then they have a constitutional right, according to the federal Constitution and according to the state Constitution of Oklahoma, to do so. And it was interesting, Ken, I think you were scheduled to speak in the university's Constitution Hall.
Yeah.
And they bounced you right out of Constitution Hall. Well, you know, go ahead, Ken. I'll give you the last word, then we got to go.
No, I was going to say, isn't that something that to uphold the Constitution, uphold the First Amendment, you uphold the freedom of speech, and so I got booted out of Constitution Hall. Yeah, that's really something, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, Ken, we will let you go, but I'm struck by a verse in the Bible that says that God causes the evil of man to praise him. So a lot more people know now about your March 5th speech, know where it is. You're probably going to get a lot more people showing up, maybe a lot more students will find their way to Paul Blair's church and listen to your talk on Origins. It could be a great night for the truth and for the gospel. Well, Ken
Amen.
Ham, go ahead.
I just said amen. Yes,
Amen.
I believe God can use it that way.
All right, Ken Ham has been our guest, president of Answers in Genesis, founder of the Creation Museum, the Ark Encounter. We got to let him go to another interview as he is in much demand there. Ken, God bless you, and thanks for taking time out to chat with us.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ken Ham from the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. Again, a guy that's in demand right now. Everybody wanted to talk to him because he's the center of attention here because of the blatant censorship and the blatant bullying that's being targeted at him by the people that claim that they are all about tolerance, they're all about compassion, they're all about standing against bullying, and yet in the name of standing against bullying, they are bullying somebody simply for what he believes. So we'll be anxious to see how that goes. March 5, I'll be speaking at the church in wherever that town was. I'm not sure what city it was in Oklahoma, but he's going to be able to go ahead and speak. And you know, the LGBT community there at the University of Central Oklahoma, they've turned into the publicity committee for Ken Ham and his visit to the campus, raising the profile of the event and very likely increasing attendance dramatically. As the Bible said, God uses the evil of man, his bigotry and his bullying and his discrimination to praise him. And we believe that is what is going to happen in Oklahoma on March 5. All right, well, that's it for the first hour. Got another Winnable War moment. This from Kern County, California. Superior Court Judge David Lempe ruled in favor of a bakery owner. This is in California. Ruled in favor of bakery owner Kathy Miller, who politely declined to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding due to her religious beliefs. How many times have we heard this before? There's a case in front of the Supreme Court over exactly the same issue. But the judge agreed with the baker's attorney that free speech and free expression of religion overrides discrimination laws. He wrote, a retail tire shop may not refuse to sell a tire because the owner does not want to sell tires to same-sex couples. No baker may place their wares in a public display case, open their shop, and then refuse to sell because of race, religion, gender, or gender identification. However, he said, she was asked to make a cake, not to sell one, and he reasoned that is artistic expression. She cannot be compelled to use her artistic expression and talent against her own religious principles and against her conscience. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. We'll be right back after the news. Don't go anywhere.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The God Who Speaks explores the evidence of the Bible's inspiration and authority through some of the world's most respected biblical scholars.
The Bible subjects itself to historical verification. It puts itself at risk of inquiry.
From the American Family Association, The God Who Speaks, available now at thegodwhospeaks.org.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Trump delivered remarks at the National Prayer Breakfast today. The Commander-in-Chief saying the United States will continue working to prevent global oppression.
We know that millions of people in Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, and other countries suffer under repressive and brutal regimes. America stands with all people suffering oppression and religious persecution. Last week, during the State of the Union, the world was inspired by the story of a North Korean defector, Mr. Ji Sung-ho, who is now back in South Korea. Before his escape, when Sung-ho was being tortured by North Korean officials, there was one thing that kept him from losing hope. Over and over again, he recited the Lord's Prayer.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi spoke on the House floor for nearly 8 hours on Wednesday, protesting the lack of a deal on DACA in the House. Democrats have demanded a DACA deal in exchange for a vote to fund the government, but one is not incorporated into the current short-term spending bill. Speaking today on Fox and Friends, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, called the move a political stunt and said it was criticized by both dreamers and members of Congress.
Serious leaders negotiate behind closed doors. They don't need to grandstand and showboat for all the world to see. She said she demanded certain things and walked away with none of them. It's the president who's been very clear about the 4 principles he expects from meaningful immigration reform. It's the wall, it's a resolution for the DACA recipients, it's the end of the visa lottery system, and certainly an end to chain migration. So what is she putting on the table? 8 hours on one issue and didn't get anything done.
A tight labor market is prompting companies to offer more benefits, including one very pricey one.
Competition for workers is the toughest it's been in 2 years, so companies are beefing up benefits. An increasing number plan to offer or expand fertility treatment benefits, such as in vitro, which can normally cost a couple between $50,000 and $75,000. A survey of 400 companies by the advisory firm Willis Towers Watson shows 66% of them plan to offer fertility benefits by next year, a 10% jump over 2017. For instance, the Wall Street Journal reports Pinterest, American Express, and SAP all increased their fertility benefits last year. Carmen Roberts, Fox News.
The University of Central Oklahoma has disinvited Creation Museum CEO Ken Ham from a March speaking engagement. Steve Jordahl explains.
The news is full of American University snowflakes getting triggered when a Trump supporter shows up, or a free market economist, a pro-lifer, a Christian marriage proponent, or any of a number of other conservatives. But protesting when a creation scientist who believes the world was created in 6 literal days invades their safe space? Disagree if you want, but protests? Ken Ham of the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter says that's exactly what's happened.
One of the professors, who's a tenured professor, she also heads up the LGBT groups on the campus as well. And so apparently this professor stirred up the LGBT students to put pressure on the Student Association to disinvite me.
Sure, Ham would have told the students that those 6 literal days included God's creation of a man and a woman. But it's what a vast majority of all past and present humans believe. Ham says what probably triggered the UCO students was this move.
When we lit up the ark with the rainbow colors, and then I wrote an article and said, hey, we're taking back the rainbows, the LGBTQ movement went berserk over that.
Ham says he has a legally binding contract with the University of Central Oklahoma and can probably collect his speaking fee and other expenses. He's not sure he will. For now, he's content to give his presentation at a nearby church and trust that God will not send another deluge to take out Central Oklahoma, the school or the state. After all, he promised he wouldn't. I'm Steve Jordahl.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hi, this is David Barton of Wall Builders Live, inviting you to join me here on American Family Radio this weekend. We take the ideas of the Founding Fathers and apply those ideas to the major issues of the day. Our guests include those who are in the headlines as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
When Sung Ho was being tortured by North Korean officials, there was one thing that kept him from losing hope. Over and over again, he recited the Lord's Prayer.
The very people warning us about Russia are in fact key players in the Russian conspiracy. The leaders of the witch hunt are witches.
The rhetoric of treason has been around a long time. It's irresponsible. It's reckless.
Adam Schiff was part of that machine.
This package does not have my support, nor does it have the support of a large number of members of our caucus. Novella Vladimir says I am an AP scholar. I'm a distinguished high school graduate. I'm a cum laude student. I'm a leader. I'm a recipient of scholarship through merit and circumstance.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ken Ham as he relayed to us how the paragons of tolerance and open-mindedness at the University of Oklahoma, Central Oklahoma, violated every standard of tolerance, every standard of inclusiveness, every standard of diversity, every standard of inclusiveness, and virtually every part of the Oklahoma State Constitution and every part of the Constitution of the United States of America. So anyway, the visibility that the controversy has given to that event is probably going to increase attendance at the end. So God's going to use the evil of man, as he always does, to praise him. All right, well, let's move on into our number 2. Let's see where we want to go. Let me grab my stack here and decide what we want to start with. Why don't we, Jeff was included a little excerpt of Nancy Pelosi's speech, and she set a record.
That was the highlights. Yeah.
Yeah. He had all the high points in that 20-second clip there. She spoke for 8 hours and 7 minutes yesterday on the House floor. They don't have any rules about filibusters, so you can talk as long as you want.
Actually, she set 2 records, one for the longest speech from the House floor and another one for the longest time that she's worked in one day.
She also set another record for the most people who have ever been put to sleep during a single speech. In fact, let's grab clip number, where is that?
8 and 9.
Clip number 8, is it?
8 and 9.
8 and 9.
Trust him.
Let's see. Yeah, let's play clip number 8. This is part of Nancy Pelosi's speech from the House floor yesterday.
Novella Vladimir says I am an AP scholar. I'm a distinguished high school graduate. I'm a cum laude student. I'm a leader. I'm a recipient of scholarship through merit and circumstance. I'm also an illegal immigrant. Well, allow me to rephrase. I'm an illegal immigrant until the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals and executive action by President Obama gave me the opportunity to live as a resident here in the United States. DACA has opened many doors for dreamers such as myself. Honestly, it has made the path to success miles more tangible, inspiring me to be the best I can.
I just thought to myself, man, can you imagine listening to that for 8 hours and 7 minutes?
Wow.
Just droned on and on and on. You know, we used to have a saying that preachers are the only people who talk in other people's sleep, but I think we can add Nancy Pelosi to that list. And by the way, Nancy Pelosi defends abortion, even though it is completely contrary to the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, which has been one of the leading organizations in the world in battling for the sanctity of human life. But she is all about quoting the Catholic Church and the Pope on illegal immigration, because there the church is on her side. So because she makes her decision about what she believes based on how she feels, based on her own sense of what's right and wrong, she'll go against the Scripture in one part of the church's theology, and she'll be for the Scripture in another part of the church's theology. So she's just kind of, it's what Paul talks about, being bounced around by every wind of doctrine, no stability. So she invokes the Catholic faith to defend illegal aliens who are breaking the law, but not to protect unborn children and not to protect nuns. She was all about going after the little sisters of the poor over the issue of contraceptives. Now let's talk about the budget issue. The government may shut down tonight. I haven't seen what the latest developments are in that fracas between the Democrats and the Republicans. Yesterday, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer made a big deal out of announcing that they had come up with a solution to the budget impasse. And this solution that they came up with, not really a solution at all, it will raise spending by over $300 billion. $300 billion. It will get rid of the debt limit until 2019, till after the next election. So all of these cowardly politicians, these are Republicans and Democrats alike, ladies and gentlemen, just cowards, one and all, kicking the can down the road on the debt ceiling till after the next election. Essentially, they're just getting rid of the debt limit. You know, in reality, as we've talked about that around here quite a bit, in reality is there just isn't a debt ceiling. There isn't a debt limit, because once they bump up against it, they just raise it. It always happens. They never hold a line on that deal, because people like you and me aren't in Congress. If we were, we would hold a line. I flat out guarantee you we'd hold a line, but they don't. So they just raise it every time they bump up against it. So it's meaningfully, it doesn't exist in any meaningful sense. So that's what's going on with the budget. And then you think about this just for a second. You've got a GOP House, you have a GOP Senate, you have a GOP president, and they could not reduce government spending by one thin dime. Instead, they expanded it by $300 billion. So that's what's going on and they're proud as punch of what they have done about that. So it's it'd be interesting to see what happens, how that's going to affect electoral events. There are some interesting things that are swirling out there. For one thing, the Democrat lead in the generic poll is shrinking. The Democrats had a 14-point lead in early December. That's now down to 9. And the generic ballot, just who do you like better, Democrats or Republican, now down to 9 points inside double digits. That may just bounce right back up, because the distinctive of the Republicans is that they have some kind of fiscal sanity, some kind of fiscal restraint. That reputation just taken a huge beating. So anyway, and I think the change is in part because the Democrats overplayed their hand on tax reform. Remember, they voted against this thing. Every Democrat voted against tax reform, against these tax cuts. People are now enjoying greater tax returns. They're now enjoying greater take-home pay. And they know that the Republicans are responsible for all of that, and the Democrats are responsible for none of it. And the Republicans, I think, are just kicking all that away. They're letting that all drain away. And more Americans believe that Trump is responsible for the current state of the economy than Barack Obama, 48% to 41%. So again, they're squandering that by what they're doing on the economy. By the way, how could anybody think Barack Obama would have anything to do with a rebounding economy? But even among the great unwashed, they still believe 48-41 that Trump is more responsible. 70% rated the economy as excellent, up 14 points from January and 24 points from January of 2017 when Donald Trump took office. Wonder why that number went up. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Words matter. Ignore the claims that the individual mandate was repealed. It wasn't. Only the penalty was zeroed out. It went from $695 or 2% of your income to $0 or 0% of your income. The next Congress could simply raise it back up because it's not been repealed. Next, consider the word insurance. One report says New York's insurance enrollment hit 4.3 million. However, of the 4.3 million enrollees, most enrolled in some version of Medicaid. Only 6% did not. And those that didn't enroll in Medicaid enrolled in Obamacare on the government exchange. Medicaid is not insurance. Obamacare is not insurance. It's all government. It's all government health care.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Sheila from Tennessee attended one of the town hall meetings hosted by Dan Celia. She left thinking about different ways to handle her finances.
Dan Celia spoke a lot about tithing and being faithful to the Lord, and I definitely intend on getting in on this charitable gift annuity, which I've never done, but it sounds so exciting. Listening to him in there, it made me reevaluate my way of spending money, my way of doing, and it shows you that a little bit can go a long way when you place it in the Master's hands. So what we need to do, and what I intend on doing, is taking a little bit and making it be worth much for the Lord.
Find out if a charitable gift annuity from the AFA Foundation is right for you at 800-326-4543, extension 345. That's 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or email foundation@afa.net.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You know, again, I don't know what's going to happen with this budget. We've got a Nancy Pelosi clip where she is pledging that she's not going to support this budget. She's going to fight it because it doesn't have anything in it for Dreamers. There's nothing in this thing for Dreamers. Where is that clip? Clip number 9. This is Nancy Pelosi, and this was yesterday. This is why she delivered this 8-hour and 7-minute speech. It was all to persuade Paul Ryan to give a vote to a bill to help the Dreamers. Didn't get what she wanted. This is clip number 9.
Why should we in the House be treated in such a humiliating way when the Republican Senate leader has given that opportunity in a bipartisan way to his membership? It does nothing to even advance, even with a commitment, without having passed the legislation first, to advance bipartisan legislation to protect Dreamers in this House. Without that commitment from Speaker Ryan, comparable to the commitment from Leader McConnell, this package does not have my support, nor does it have the support of a large number of members of our caucus.
All right, so she's saying a lot of Democrats are going to vote against this. So you wonder where the vote's going to come from to pass this thing. Paul Ryan thinks that a majority of Republicans will vote for this thing. House Freedom Caucus, I don't believe will. They're the true believers in the House, but there's only 40 of them. That would be enough to torpedo anything if the Democrats weren't behind it. But this is a $300 billion increase. It's going to double the amount of debt. The projection is that our government's now we're going to go $1 trillion into debt. Originally, it was about $400 billion. Now we're going to go with this new budget $1 trillion into debt over the next year. So we're getting back up to Barack Obama numbers under Republican president, Republican Senate, and a Republican House. You know, it's enough just to start making you tear your hair out, and you wonder what's the use of electing Republicans. Well, maybe they can still do us some good when it comes to immigration. Let's grab clip number...
Can I say one thing before we move on? We shouldn't overlook the point also that Nancy Pelosi stood for 8 hours, 7 minutes in defense of illegal immigration and dreamers, yet she sat the whole time during the State of the Union address, which was about Americans.
Yeah, couldn't stand once for Americans, but stood for 8 hours and 7 minutes for people that don't even have the legal right to be in this country. Amen. That's a pretty telling snapshot about what her values and priorities are. Now, this is the director of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Were you able to boost the sound on this one, Rob? Sounds okay? Yeah, because he was being taped at a table where he was speaking away from the mic, so had Rob, I think, boosted the sound so we can hear it. His name is Lee Francis Cisna, and he's explaining to President Trump one of the problems with immigration in dealing with gangs. You will not believe what he tells us here, and you got to assume he's telling the truth because the president is sitting at the table, and the attorney general is probably somewhere within earshot. And here's the problem, he says, that we have in dealing with gang members, dealing with MS-13. So something like 30,000 MS-13 gang members in the United States. And here's the problem, it says, that we run into. Clip R1.
There are no grounds in the law right now that permit us to deport a gang member merely because he's a gang member. We have to wait until they've actually killed somebody or harmed an American. Then we have a reason to deport them. Then we can get them. Or if they're here unlawfully, okay. But if they're here lawfully and they're a gang member, there's no ground of removability. Similarly, there's no ground of inadmissibility. So we can't stop them from coming in, and my people may have to grant them an immigration benefit because there's nothing in the law that makes a gang member, merely because they're a gang member, ineligible for that benefit. Indeed, they might even get citizenship. Under the law right now, you have to have what's called good moral character to become a citizen. But gang membership is not explicitly on the list of things that makes you not qualify for good moral character.
So he says, look, we can't deport somebody just because they're a gang member. They got to go out and shoot somebody in the head before we can do that. Even we know what their values are. We know what their tendencies are. We know what their track record is on the streets. We can't deport them, can't touch them. And we can't even keep them from coming into the country. Even if we know they're a gang member, when they show up at the doorstep, we have to let them in. Might even have to give them citizenship. So he's appealing for Congress to come alongside and do something about this to help with this huge, huge problem. Now, I got a couple of sound bites from the prayer breakfast this morning. Donald Trump spoke at it. The president did. And let's play clip number... the first one I want to play is clip number... Where is the second? Clip number 2. Yeah, clip number 2. There we go. This is Donald Trump at the prayer breakfast this morning, talking about a defector from North Korea.
Last week, during the State of the Union, the world was inspired by the story of a North Korean defector, Mr. Ji Sung-ho, who is now back in South Korea. Before his escape, when Sung-ho was being tortured by North Korean officials, there was one thing that kept him from losing hope. Over and over again, he recited the Lord's Prayer. He prayed for peace, and he prayed for freedom. And now, as you know, Sung-ho is free and a symbol of hope to millions of people all around the world.
All right, so there's a man prayed the Lord's Prayer, and it led him to freedom from bondage in North Korea. Now here's clip R2. This is Donald Trump talking about the key to America's success and prosperity. Listen to this.
All we have to do is open our eyes and look around us, and we can see God's hand. In the courage of our fellow citizens, we see the power of God's love at work in our souls and the power of God's will to answer all of our prayers. When Americans are able to live by their convictions, to speak openly of their faith, and to teach their children what is right, our families thrive, our communities flourish, and our nation can achieve anything at all.
And there was a pretty good round of applause after that. Our nation can achieve anything at all. So Donald Trump, again, putting Christian faith at the center of America's life, openly referred to Jesus Christ during his comments, during his speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. You know, that's the most subdued, I think I mentioned that to you, Rob, the most subdued I think I've ever heard President Trump. And there was just a sense of almost humility about him as he delivered these remarks. I got to tell you, I think God's doing a work in President Trump's heart. I think that's where that sense of humility comes from. Normally there was no brashness, no braggadocio. He was a humble guy talking about God. So I think maybe that's a reflection that God's doing a real work in his life. Now, you may be familiar, or maybe remember the name Viktor Orban. I've talked about him quite a bit. He is the president of, or the prime minister of Hungary, and he was one of the first to build a wall, an immigration wall, cut their immigration problem, illegal immigration problem, down to nothing. I mean, like from over 100,000 a year prior to virtually less than 100 a year later, and it was the wall that did it. So he's an example that proves that walls and fences actually work. Now, he's being pressured by the European Union to allow Muslim migrants into Hungary, and he is not going to do it. We'll see how that ends up. But he prepared a video for the Hungarian people, put it on his Facebook page, and we're going to play the video for you, so you'll hear him speaking in Hungarian, and I will just simply translate as he speaks. I will use the Hungarian that I learned and mastered when I was in junior high school, and I will concentrate and listen carefully, and I will translate Viktor Orban for you from Hungarian to English. Now, if you believe that story, I got a bridge to sell you. Anyway, here's Viktor Orban talking about why he's holding the line in Hungary. The president of Fidesz has discussed yesterday the announcement of the Belgian prime minister that they will, if necessary with force, obligate Central European countries, including Hungary, to accept migrants. According to their plan, this will happen in June at the summit of the prime ministers in Brussels. Our presidency has taken a stand. We cannot give in to extortion. For us, Hungary is first. We will fight those who want to change the Christian identity of Hungary and Europe. Right? How'd I do?
Yeah, you
good.
did.
Not
did
bad
good.
for a guy for Hungary being his third language. Huh?
Yeah, you need to throw a little accent in there to
the
make
accent.
it believable.
Tough on the accent.
Yeah.
Anyway, reading from the transcript there, just having fun.
Yeah, the one word in there, that forced.
Yeah.
You can plan on using force.
Yeah, and you wonder what that means. I mean, you think of force, you think military force, unless they're talking about some kind of economic pressure they're going to put on Hungary. But it's interesting to me, Donald Trump, his slogan is America First. Doesn't mean America alone. It's not America by itself. But he says, as the president, I have a responsibility, a moral responsibility, as well as a political responsibility, to put the needs and the concerns and the interest of my people first, of my nation first. This is exactly what Viktor Orban is saying, and Donald Trump has said this repeatedly. He says, I hope every president and every prime minister in the world does exactly the same thing, puts their country first. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the interest of Hungary first, and the interests of Hungary do not include making room for Muslim immigrants who come here with no education, who aren't even literate in the language of their home country, who come here with a murderous ideology, which we don't know if they've gotten rid of it by the time they get here or not. We have to assume that they're going to remember what they were taught about Islam growing up, which is their responsibility to slay the idolaters. That's us, my fellow Hungarians, wherever you find them. So we just can't take the risk. I can't take the risk of submitting the Hungarian people to that sort of vulnerability. Just not going to do it. And we're not going to let the EU force us into doing it. So He's thrown down. And Viktor Orban gets it. He gets it that the European nations are Christian nations by history and heritage and values. And that's the key to their future, is rediscovering a pride in their Christian history. And that's the key to our future as a nation, rediscovering a pride in our Christian heritage, our Christian history, and our Christian values. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
Anything goes. This is Ken Ham, president of the Apologetics Ministry, Answers in Genesis. A recent study found the majority of Americans think sex before marriage, same-sex relationships, and divorce are morally acceptable. Why? Because our culture is steeped in a secular worldview. You see, in a biblical worldview, God created us, and He makes the rules. His Word provides a standard for living, and we're expected to obey it. But in a secular worldview, we aren't accountable to anyone. We make the rules. So really, anything goes now because morality is just whatever's right in our own eyes. It's no surprise the secular world thinks this way, but many in the church are adopting this thinking as well. We need to get back to God's Word.
Discover more about what God's Word says about morality by going to AnswersRadio.com. And while you're there, sign up for email insights from Ken Ham at AnswersRadio.com.
Every day in the red light districts of Mumbai, India, there are children as young as 8 being trafficked and exploited. And it isn't just young girls they're looking for. Some men are looking for young boys. This cannot go on any longer. Team up with American Family Radio and India Partners. With your gift of just $7.08, you provide a day of safety and shelter at a new India Partners safe house far away from the city. That's $7.08 means school, shelter, meals, and the love of Jesus. Coming up here on American Family Radio, we're going to address the issue of child trafficking, but we aren't going to do it in a way that is graphic or unsafe for your children to hear. But we will tell you now that we're going to address a topic that could, for some, be uncomfortable. We hope you'll listen and team up with American Family Radio and India Partners to provide hope for a new safe house for boys in the red light district. Get more information at afr.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Some more news on the Bob Mueller texts memo front. We talked about yesterday about these new tranche of texts that emerged, text exchanges between Lisa Page and her lover, Peter Strzok. By the way, I saw a picture of her in the Daily Mail this morning. Boy, I think this controversy has taken a toll on that poor woman. I mean, she shows it on every line in her face. I mean, her picture is in the newspaper every single day. She's just disappeared from view. This is the first time anybody's seen her in public since this thing started. And they say that the wages of sin is death, and you can look at her face and see an example of that in action. But we saw some more about the nature of their exchanges. Peter Strzok, for instance, in one of his exchanges said that I hate Trump. I hate Trump. And he also referred to the residents of Loudoun County, Virginia, Republican voters, as largely ignorant hillbillies. And again, I've told you, ladies and gentlemen, this is how the left looks at us. He says at one point, referring to the voters in Virginia, the bigoted hatred of half of our population. So half of the people in Virginia he thinks are bigots and haters just because they voted for a Republican candidate. So that's Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They're the ones that are hip deep in this whole deal. Now, the networks, by the way, didn't cover the revelation of these new FBI texts at all. ABC, NBC, CBS all completely ignored it. Even the release of the Chuck Grassley report, which largely confirmed the contents of the House memo, the one that Trey Gowdy put together, and even cinched down the fact that the Steele dossier was the foundation for the FISA warrant. You know, the House memo left some room to maneuver there. And I think it partly is Trey Gowdy. You know, you listen to that guy. Trey Gowdy is a little bit protective and defensive of the law enforcement community, of judges and prosecutors and all that kind of thing. He's been real defensive about Bob Mueller, still thinks that he's a man of unimpeachable integrity. I'm not convinced, but Trey Gowdy said nothing but nice things about Bob Mueller. We got to stay out of his way. He's a man of principle, all that. And I'm not seeing it, but Trey Gowdy sees that way, and I think it's maybe professional courtesy. But so, and he's the one that prepared the House memo, and so he left a little room for maneuverability there on whether the Steele dossier was the basis for the FISA warrant. The Chuck Grassley memo leaves no doubt about it at all, that the FISA court leaned heavily, is the word he uses in his memo, leaned heavily on the Steele dossier to get the warrant from the FISA court. A uranium, you know, another scandal that's been kind of percolating at the same time is the Uranium One scandal. This has to do with the sale of 20% of America's uranium deposits to Russia, to companies in Russia. There's an FBI informant that informed to the FBI for years about all of the behind-the-scenes negotiations and haggling that was going on over this uranium deal. And he told 3 congressional committees in a written statement that Moscow routed millions of dollars to America with the expectation that it would be used to benefit Bill Clinton's charitable efforts, while Secretary of State Hillary Clinton quarterbacked a reset in U.S.-Russian relations. So millions of dollars flowing from Russia to the Clinton Foundation, and hopefully get some to Bill Clinton to help him with his charitable efforts and all that. And they had hired an American lobbying firm, paying them millions of dollars in the hopes that they would be able to influence the Obama administration. So you start looking at this, and it looks like the collusion, whatever collusion there was between the Clintons and Russia, and maybe between the FBI and Russia, because they're the ones that had the informants that were in place to talk to Russia and report back on them. $3 million totally in total was at risk there. And this Campbell guy, who was their undercover informant, Douglas Campbell, he is a businessman from the United States. The FBI valued his work enough to give him a $50,000 check in 2016. And the Obama administration just made one decision after another that ended up benefiting the Russian nuclear industry. And we still import 90% of the uranium that we use in our nuclear reactors. And Campbell wrote, this guy that was the informant, said that the Russian nuclear executives were bragging about how weak the U.S. government was in giving away uranium business, and they were confident that Russia was going to be able to secure the strategic advantage they were looking for in the U.S. uranium market, and sure enough, they did. And Campbell was even curious about this, about why they're so weak and passive in the face of this Russian aggression. He said, I asked my FBI handlers why the U.S. is not more aggressive. The response that he got from the FBI was that politics was somehow involved. So the FBI admitting to him, look, this business about the sale of uranium, this got politics written all over it. The FBI was in a position to know. Now, a lot of people are using the word treason, bandying about from one to another. The accusations that people are treasonous is flying all over the place. Here's a Jonathan Turley, clip 3, and I agree with him here. He's critical of Donald Trump, critical of everybody that's using this term treason loosely, and I think he's got a good point, because the definition of treason in the Constitution is actually very clear. It's giving aid and comfort to our nation's enemies, to have an open and declared enemy of the United States, and then have some American working on their behalf while we are in armed conflict. I mean, an enemy is used in a technical term as somebody with whom we are at war. And you provide help for them, aid and comfort. That is a treasonous thing, and you can be prosecuted for that. It's the only crime that's identified in the Constitution. Here is Jonathan Turley. He's a professor of law at George Washington School of Law. He was on Morning Joe, MSNBC. Here's what he had to say.
The framers had an interesting position on treason. They tried to take this word off the table in our political discussions because when our country was formed, it was very common for the crown to accuse people of being traitors and to take their land and imprison them. And people like James Madison wanted to stop it. He wanted to create a standard to put it in our Constitution. It's one of the few occasions of this type of action where the crime is defined in the Constitution itself, and it's there to make it more difficult to allege that someone is a traitor. And so a traitor under the United States law and Constitution is really someone who is involved with a country with which we are at war, someone who is doing something that is truly undermining, like a wartime treasonous act. The problem we have today is that people seem to mean it. The rhetoric of treason has been around a long time. It's irresponsible, it's reckless, but people increasingly seem to mean it. They're saying that, Trump should be charged with treason, which is facially ridiculous. And Trump is responding by saying, maybe the Democrats are treasonous for not applauding, which is equally ridiculous.
So I think that's a good point. People are bandying that word about. It's a very serious word. And if you use it lightly, you use it without really meaning it. And if you use it and you mean it and your understanding is skewed, then it cheapens our discourse and it cheapens what ought to be a very, very serious issue. Now here is Tucker Carlson talking about Adam Schiff, clip number 4. And he's talking about RT, which is Russia Today. I've been on this network before, was a guest of a guy named Tom Hartman, who was one of the hosts on the RT network. It was always adversarial. Every time I went on that program with Tom Hartman, extremely adversarial. Well, it's because he was working for the Russian government on RT, Russia Today. Here's what Tucker Carlson says about Adam Schiff and RT.
Now tonight we've learned that the foreign subversion goes even deeper than that. The Russian conspiracy is so subtle, so crafty, such a bewildering Slavic hall of mirrors that the very people warning us about Russia are in fact key players in the Russian conspiracy. The leaders of the witch hunt are witches. Our government considers RT so dangerous that the channel has been forced to register as a foreign agent. RT employees who fail to register could face prison time. No outlet in this country has ever been forced to do that. RT is a sinister place. Everybody says so. So who would go on a channel like that, one whose sole agenda is to discredit and destroy the American experiment? Well, none other than one Adam Bennett Schiff of Burbank, California. You know him as Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, the man leading the charge against Vladimir Putin's propaganda machine. And yet, Adam Schiff was part of that machine. Seriously.
All right, so actively working with Russia Today, whose interests are purely and solely to advance the cause of Russia politically. It's a government network funded by the government. Now, there were 2 Russian comedians that pulled a prank on Adam Schiff. They called him, and it was a prank call. And listen to Adam Schiff. He's saying, look, I recognize it right away. This was a bogus phone call. See if Adam Schiff sounds like a guy who thinks he's being pranked or whether he thinks it's serious. Clip 5.
Well, obviously, we would welcome a chance to get copies of those recordings. So we will try to work with the FBI to figure out, along with your staff, how we can obtain copies of those.
Of course, we will provide you all our copies of all our materials, but I also would like to let you know that Sobchak and Buzova will pretty soon visit our country, and we could read them and deliver them to your embassy, and we also could extradite them to your country, and you can put them to your special jail, Guantanamo.
Well, I'll be in touch with the FBI about this, and we'll make arrangements with your staff. I think it probably would be best to provide these materials to both our committee and to the FBI. And so we'll make arrangements between my staff and yours on how to facilitate that.
Sorry about the music there. That was put in there by the comedians.
Yeah, it sounded like James Bond or Mission Impossible or something.
But who's colluding with Russia? It's Adam Schiff. We'll be back with your phone calls.
Does God exist? Is the Bible true? Does truth exist?
When people say there is no truth, I simply ask them this question. Is that true?
Join us this weekend for Cross-Examined with Frank Turek, author of the bestseller, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
I actually think it takes more faith not to believe in the truthfulness of the Bible than it does to believe in the Bible.
Cross-Examined with apologist Frank Turek, Saturday morning at 9 Central and Sunday afternoon at 4 Central on American Family Radio.
It says, and do the first works. What is that? Go back and begin by faith to obediently do what you did when you were first saved, that you're not doing anymore.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Looking for a great vacation for you and your family spring break? Well, so are we. And I think we've got the place for you. Southeast Houston suffered unbelievable damage because of Hurricane Harvey. Hundreds of thousands of families have had their homes gutted because of the flooding they endured last year in September. Now you and I get a chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus. March 10th to March 24th, 8 Days of Hope is going to do its first ever back-to-back trip. 8 Days of Hope, 14 and 15. It's free. All you have to do is get to Houston. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who know how to work with their hands, and maybe they do this for a living. We're also looking for people that are less skilled, but are still looking to be a part of something way bigger than just themselves. You don't have to come for all 2 weeks. You can come for as little as 3 days. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com. Come be a part of something huge. 8 Days of Hope, 14 and 15. Be the hands and feet of Jesus in Southeast Houston. 8daysofhope.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Number to call if you want to join the conversation is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. That's 888-589-8840. And while you're calling in, I want to give you another phone number, so get ready to write this one down. It's how you can become a part of helping India Partners. They are working on a new boys' safe house. So contributions this campaign year will go toward completing the purchase and the building, the ongoing work, the expansion of a boys' safe house. Last year they completed a girls' safe house. This is for kids as young as 8 years old that are human trafficked in Mumbai, the red light district in Mumbai. And India Partners has created these safe houses for these children. Safe houses are away from the red light district in Mumbai, so children can go there. They can find a place where they're safe. They can be rescued from that environment. They can get medical care. They can get counseling. They can get an education. They can have an atmosphere where they are secure, where they're safe, where they are looked after. And you can do it for just $7 a day. That's what it takes to provide a full day of room and board, Christian school, private tutoring, medical attention, counseling, and sharing the love of Jesus. So $50 will provide a full week of safety care and rescue. $100 will provide 2 weeks of safety. $212 will provide about a month of safety, rescue, and care. And so think about making a donation for India Partners. We partner with them once a year to help them raise funds for what we think is a terrific, terrific project. Jeff and Ann were there. They can tell you about it. We'll talk to them about it as the campaign continues. So get your credit card ready and call this number, 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396. You can give online at afr.org. online at afr.net, or give to India Partners by calling 877-616-2396 with your credit card handy. Number to call and join our conversation here is 888-589-8840. Give us a call. Make room for as many calls as we can. Let's grab clip number 6 as you're calling in. This is Cheryl Atkinson, great journalist. She got bounced by CBS because they would not run her reports on Benghazi. She wanted to report the truth about Benghazi, and the CBS brass was not interested. The head of CBS News was the brother of the guy who was the national security advisor to Barack Obama. He wasn't about to make his kid brother look bad, so they just spiked the stories that Cheryl Atkinson wanted to run. Anyway, a very good journalist, and she had some information about FISA judges. She talks about it here in clip number 6.
I think not. You know, long before Trump announced running for president, I had intel sources, contacts who I'm still in touch with, who have said that for a long time there has been presentation of bad evidence to the FISA court to justify warrants, that there has been sort of a reverse engineering when political figures want to target people illegally. They find someone in their orbit that they can target and then capture them incidentally and then accidentally capture their data and unmask them, acting surprised that that's who it was when that's the target that they intended to capture all along.
So, you know, I wondered about this when I saw that these FISA judges accepted this report, the Steele dossier, as evidence, because there's nothing in there that's verified. The FBI's never even pretended that the information there is verified. And yet the FISA court went ahead and issued a warrant for surveillance. It was renewed 3 times, 4 times actually total. And, you know, you got Paul Manafort. They busted into his home in the middle of the night, so he's headed for prison. Michael Flynn is headed for prison. You have this, the other guy, the guy that starts with a G, Papadopoulos.
I never got that one.
He confessed to lying to the FBI, so he's in legal trouble. And so a lot of damage has been done to a lot of people, and the FISA court, by acting on what has turned out to be a completely unverified and salacious dossier, even James Comey admitted that. A lot of people's lives have been wrecked by this thing. And Cheryl Atkins, look, I've got evidence that indicates that this FISA court may be bent. And I wondered about that. Man, what is going on with these judges that would grant such a warrant with such power to affect people's life on something this flimsy? And she says, well, maybe it's not accidental after all. Maybe all of that is deliberate. Well, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's grab a call from Jim in Louisiana. Jim, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, Brian, I just wanted to make a comment on Ham.
Yeah, Ken Ham?
You know, you asked him if he was his organization or whatever going to do something in retaliation about that. And I think he should, because, you know, we always say the church just sits back and we never do nothing and we just let people bully over us. Well, I think it's time that we should stand up, and he should even, if he has to, go to court over this thing, put out all points bulletin out to the Christians across America, and I'd be one of the first to give a donation to pay for the lawyer. But I think it's just time that we push back. You know, we always say the church needs to do something, so I think it's time we push back, Brian.
Well, you know, and the good news, Jim, is a lot more Christians are doing that. I mean, that's how this cake baker in Colorado got to the Supreme Court. He said, look, I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm going to court to protect my constitutional right to freedom of speech and the free exercise of religion. And that's why his case got all the way to the Supreme Court. He didn't just roll over. Now, there are plenty of First Amendment law firms that would be happy to take Ken Ham's case. So the question is whether he really wants to do it. The question is how strong a case they would have. I think they'd have a pretty strong case on the grounds of the signed contract. That's a legally binding deal. You can't just walk away from something like that. So I'm sure Ken Ham has thought about that. I'm sure he's taken counsel with people on his staff and there at Answers in Genesis about whether they ought to do that. And there are First Amendment law firms that would be happy to help him by taking his case to court. So we'll see what happens. Let's go to Charles in Findlay, Ohio. Charles, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. Just a
simple comment about what President Trump and the President of Hungary have said about putting the people first, their country first. It occurred to me, when the president puts their country first, what happens is the people get fed and have peace. Yeah, Russia, they're all about power. North Korea, they're all about power. So none of those people are eating very well. When you put your people first, well, then you're more apt to do what it takes to get along to get your country fed.
Yeah. Well, there you go, Charles. That's a profound observation, profound insight. And the people are happier, and your country is more prosperous and more secure. Let's go to Daniel in Cameron, North Carolina. Daniel, welcome. What's on your mind?
You lost him.
I lost him. We lost Daniel. Sorry about that, Daniel. I think that is my bad. Let's go to Scott in Big Sandy, Tennessee. Scott, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, hi, Brian.
Hey.
I just wanted to make a comment about your recent clip on the word treason. And, I agree it's watered down a bit and used where it shouldn't be, but let's look at another aspect of this. The founding fathers, when it was first used, had no idea of a telephone, let alone the future technology that we'd have. And we have all kinds of wars going on, using that type of technology that we've seen it. If someone, Nikita Khrushchev, for example, said many years ago, we'll take over the United States from within without a shot. And that's an enemy. But the enemies that we have, if they're going to undermine the president, our duly elected government, and try to bring in their own and alter it, that is an enemy. It's acting as an enemy. And so if they do that, it really can be considered a treasonous act when the end result is going to be so dramatic and just as dramatic as toppling a government.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate the thought, Scott, and you may have a point there that they may not be an enemy against whom we have declared war, but they may be somebody whose interests are so hostile to our interests that they would count as an enemy. All right, Scott, good observation. Let's grab a call from Donna next in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Donna, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, Brian. This is a little bit of sarcasm, but regarding Nancy Pelosi, I think she needs a new job. And I think if she would stand for 8 hours a day where the immigration wall is supposed to be and preach about the racism, bigotry, phobias, and hatred and flawed national history of America that she believes in, maybe that would bring a halt to immigration.
Yeah.
Or maybe
they would
the
be saying, that's a
don't
brilliant...
maybe the immigrants aren't finding that to be the case. Maybe that's why they're coming and staying.
Well, that's a brilliant observation, Donna. They would say to themselves, why would I want to live in the country that Nancy Pelosi is describing? Who would want to live there? That place is a shanty town. That place is a veritable cauldron of hate and bigotry and racism. I don't want to move there with my family. I'm going to stay home. Way better here. So that's a good point, Donna. The other thing is maybe she could deliver that speech. You know the guy that's selling those My Pillows on TV? She could. They could have her in the corner just delivering this speech, just running it during every commercial. People say, man, I got to get me one of those. All right, let's go to Ruth in Tupelo, Mississippi. Ruth, welcome. What's on your mind?
Brother Brian, I ain't got long. I love you and watch you every day, listen to you, totally respect you. Just wanted to mention about Job. I was wanting to know earlier, I knew what you were talking about, but you didn't mention it. God told the devil he could not take Job's soul. He could not bother his soul. But Job did have boils and stuff on his body. And then I just want to share that. Until I want to ask how you're doing. All us listeners that love you as a brother in Christ want to know how you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you, Ruth. I appreciate it. And Ruth is exactly right. His body did break out in boils. God at one point gave Satan permission to afflict his health. And he did so. And had those boils, and he was scraping himself with potsherds and all that kind of stuff. Quick update on my health. As I mentioned, some of my nerves were damaged because of the radiation, but nerves that are on the peripheral system, outside kind of part of your body, they can heal up over time, regenerate, and they're slowly regenerating. So keep praying that will continue to happen.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio. Faith, family,
freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. It could be a long night for lawmakers in Washington trying to avoid a government shutdown at midnight. Jared Halbert has the latest.
Included in a short-term spending bill is a 2-year budget agreement reached by Senate leaders that would increase Pentagon and non-defense spending by $300 billion.
It's a good deal for the American people.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is urging support, but in the House, support is less clear. Fiscal conservatives warn it spends too much. Democrats were hoping to secure protections for dreamers.
I can say that we're going to